But Lauren, if you are ready, give us a sense in terms of facts and figures of what is the housing assistance situation right now?
Sure. So briefly, I want to talk about some data that we have that we've been using to estimate the need for housing assistance as we go along. So our latest iteration of that was conducted in early 2021, and we estimated that roughly 2,000 households that rent in McLean County have had at least one person in the household lose employment due to COVID. We estimated that resulting lost monthly wages were about $5.9 million. So more than half of those households were able to claim roughly $1.5 million in enhanced monthly unemployment benefits. That's the extra $300 a week that people were getting. And even with the enhanced benefits, though, we estimated that there was still $550,000 needed on a monthly basis to close that rent gap in McLean County. And considering that the average household in McLean County is about 2.5 persons per household, we approximated that 1,900 to 2,000 people may be vulnerable to experiencing homelessness should the eviction moratorium be completely lifted at once. And that being said, the Housing Assistance Coalition, which is a group of local governments as well as social service providers that have been working together since May 2020 to really tackle this housing crisis head on, has continuously made an impact on the housing needs of McLean County residents during the pandemic. So since May 2020, nearly $3 million in housing related assistance has been provided locally. That includes over $1.2 million in rental assistance, $1 million in utility assistance, $30,000 in mortgage assistance, as well as a variety of assistance for other housing related needs. So despite this unprecedented effort, there's still a great need out there for rental assistance. With the average monthly assistance that coalition members have been providing being at approximately $130,000, the potential rental funding gap is still an estimated $420,000 on a monthly basis. But during this panel, you will hear about local and statewide efforts that will be really crucial to closing this eviction gap before the moratorium ends.
Okay. A lot of facts and figures there. If there's anything you want to reinforce in the chat box, go ahead and do that if you can, or send it to me and I can put it out there. In the meantime, Taylor Long has joined us from the town of Normal, and thank you for finding a hotspot or something as you found yourself without Wi-Fi for a moment. Taylor, you've been in the thick of things with the current efforts going on. Tell us a little bit about the current programs that the city and the town have been doing, and the kind of help that it's provided tenants and landlords up to this point.
Sure, happily. Thank you all for joining. As Kathleen said, I'm with the town of Normal, and what I help run there at the town is the town's COVID-19 related housing assistance program. So I'm kind of here tonight to just kind of speak to the programs that are out there right now, the service providers, and what we've done or tried to do these last months. So with that, to just kind of explain where this assistance has been coming from. Lauren touched on it, but it's local nonprofits and public service providers like Mid-Central Community Action, the Immigration Project, local churches have also had a great role to play. And then a good chunk has been local government. So at the township level, they have programs that kind of exist independent of the pandemic, but kind of stepped in and helped fill the gap. And then the town of Normal and the city of Bloomington both received special allocations of federal money that's gone specifically toward this. So that's kind of who's been in this realm right now, this space. So who qualifies for assistance for these programs? So that's homeowners and renters alike. And then what's the most crucial thing is, when it comes to eligibility is, have you had job or income loss due to the pandemic? So in most circumstances, that's folks that have either been laid off in full or still unemployed. Maybe they're back to work, but their hours are reduced due to different kind of scheduling changes that have been done for social distancing at employers. caring for folks, either caring for folks or children at home. That's another thing that's eaten into a lot of people's ability to work. So that certainly qualifies. And then on the more serious end is folks that are quarantining, or unfortunately those that have, contracted COVID-19. So those are the types of folks that qualify. What can be covered with the existing programs right now? As Lauren touched on, it's rent or mortgage and utilities. So most programs kind of cobble together based on the maximum amount of assistance that a provider is able to give and the maximum number of months they're able to cover, try to cobble together the most bang for a tenant, and I guess ultimately a landlord or utility provider's buck as well in providing assistance. So with that said, the programs that exist right now, there are a number of limitations, and those come to be because of the funding source, either at the state or federal level. Most programs right now have a 3 to 6 months kind of cap on the amount of assistance that can be had. So they can only help with, town included, can only help with maybe 3 to 6 months of worth of arrears, rental arrears or utility arrears. And that kind of bleeds into the next point there, that folks currently, in order to receive assistance, have to actually be behind here currently. So plenty of people aren't, they know they're going to be here soon based on their circumstance, but unfortunately, these programs aren't able to help out until a person's actually behind, which is, a horrible spot for folks to be in. Nobody wants to be there. And then the third and final point there is that up to now, these programs have been kind of tenant initiated. The local, either the ones available here locally, funded either by state or federal funding, have been tied to tenants taking the initiative and applying for assistance. And so we can get into that here later, I'm sure, but that's those 3 points, those 3 limitations on existing programs are hopefully helped by the state program that we're talking about here tonight. So just wanted to end my note here in the beginning on those are kind of the 3 things that we hope the state program helps with, these limitations that have been in place. That's what makes the state program so exciting, is that they touch on these and try to make it easier for both tenants and of course landlords to receive assistance. So
great. And that's a great segue to our next panelist, Mustaali Carbaidwala, who, as I introduced earlier, is the managing broker from Class Act Realty. I met Mustaali recently, and as you'll hear from him in a moment, I'm going to ask him to speak about the situation in terms of the impact on tenants and landlords and the community as a whole. And I think this is a voice that's very important for us to hear right now. So Mustaali, take it away, please.
Thank you very much, Kathleen. Thanks for everyone to join. Usually nobody ever wants to hear from the landlord, so it's nice to have this platform to speak. Can you hear me okay? Just give me a thumbs up. Kathleen, can you hear me? Okay, perfect.
Very well.
So as Kathleen mentioned, I'm the managing broker for Class Act Realty. We currently have about 1,000 units under management. I personally own almost 600 units. A third of that portfolio is student on ISU's campus, and the rest is residential. We have units ranging from single family homes to 50-unit buildings, older properties, and brand new construction, and we're spread all over town, Normal and Bloomington. And just I want to mention that I represent less than 1% of the landlords and property owners in town. So I've got a list of issues that are, as Kathleen mentioned, currently faced by tenants, landlords, and the community. So I'll go through these 5, and just keep in mind that some of these are very obvious that we're all familiar with, and some of these may not be as obvious. So regardless, I'll go through them. The first one is the eviction moratorium. So simply put, we cannot evict a tenant for non-payment of rent. Everybody kind of knows that, is familiar with that. Roughly 10% of our tenants are currently struggling and behind on their rental obligations. So of the 1,000 units that we manage, about 100 of those units are currently behind. We have 40 tenants who are over 60 days behind. And if the moratorium were lifted today, those folks would be facing eviction. Okay, that's 40 people homeless in our community. And again, it doesn't take a mathematician to figure out how big of a problem that is for the community if all landlords operate similarly. Again, I represent less than 1%. Okay. What some people may not understand is that the obligation that these tenants have for this back rent doesn't go away. It stays with them. They get sent to collections. They get a judgment placed against them. Their wages get garnished. It's a really difficult situation to climb out of. Not just that, that eviction gets placed on their record. So if they decide to try to find residency elsewhere in the community, typically those landlords will call us and try to get a reference. And if they do a background check, that eviction stays on their record. So it becomes really difficult to find another apartment to lease in town with that eviction on their record. Okay. The second thing I want to mention is that expenses have increased dramatically. And again, these 5 issues are caused by the pandemic. They're pandemic related. So property taxes, raw materials such as lumber have gone up exponentially. Labor, utilities, they've all gone up. Rents have remained relatively flat, and now we've got a delinquency issue. That puts a lot of pressure on the landlords. Another issue I want to mention, and I know several landlords have brought this up too, is water bills in Normal and Bloomington are tied to the property and not the tenant. This has always been the case, and we've always been able to work around that. However, due to the pandemic, the municipalities cannot shut off the water for non-payment, okay? And so what happens is the water bill goes to the tenant, and if the tenant's experiencing hardship and cannot pay it, the water remains on, and the owner of the building gets notified when the municipality is about to put a lien on their property. So we have no knowledge that this water meter is running and the tenant is not paying the bill until we get notice of a lien being put on the property. Okay. Number 3, the lack of availability for materials, furniture, appliances. Those are extremely scarce. I just had a unit a few months ago, had it all ready, tenant ready to go. We had to wait 8 weeks for a stove. And so that's just one example, and it goes on in parts, things like that. It's just very difficult to find materials right now. Lack of labor, that's bullet number 4. And that's no surprise. Restaurants and the service industry is really struggling with finding help. We've had an ad running since September of last year, just trying to find help and keep up. So it's extremely difficult. And then the last piece I'll mention is at the start of the pandemic, the SBA released a loan called the EIDL. It stands for Economic Injury Disaster Loan. And this is different than the PPP, which can be forgivable. The EIDL is a loan, and it's used for industries that got hit because of the pandemic, which we did in the real estate business. And this is a loan that has to be paid back. And many property owners took out this loan just to stay afloat, to keep up, to pay property taxes, to pay maintenance, just routine day-to-day things. It wasn't used to invest and make the property better. It was just to keep the lights on. So the original terms of this loan was a 1-year deferment. So there wasn't any payment due until May of 2021, and then they deferred it again. So now it's not due until May of 2022. And so the problem is this loan just adds on top of all the other expenses without really any benefit. So I bring that up because that's an issue that we're, as property owners, going to experience a year from now when those loans require payments. So I say this, I kind of had a little bit of a landlord perspective, but this is a landlord issue, this is a tenant issue, and more importantly, this is a community issue. Landlords live in this community, the tenants live in this community. And if we have thousands of people that are potentially going to be homeless, that puts a lot of strain on the social service agencies, the municipalities, to try to find places for these people to live. So I appreciate this platform to speak, and these programs that are coming down the pipeline are going to be critical for our community and the people in our community. Just one last thing, I'll give a little plug, Lauren. I know I don't want to steal your thunder, but this new funding that's available, it sounds amazing. It sounds like it's going to really help the landlords, the tenants, and the community. For those landlords that are listening, if you were part of that first round that we had last year, I believe the new grant and the new funding has made a lot of changes to improve on that last go around. So I think this is a huge win for all of us, and I think it's important for landlords and tenants to take advantage of this as soon as the doors open.
Excellent. Thank you, Mustaali. From some of the comments that I'm seeing and forwarding on to Adrian, sounds like you've hit on a couple of key points that other landlords are experiencing. So thank you for that. I want to turn our attention to Judge Fellheimer and ask you a few questions, if I can, Judge. Tell us a little bit about are there any residential evictions that are currently allowed, and what kind can be filed at this time? And you are muted, so if you could just click your unmute button.
Got it there. I thought you were unmuting us. So perfect. It's like living in my house. I get muted occasionally by those that live there with me. So as far as the evictions that are going forward now, really from the beginning, there's been always what we call the health and safety evictions. So there's really 4 types right now. One is whether the defendant poses a direct threat to the health and safety of other tenants. 2, whether the defendant meaning tenant, poses an immediate and severe risk to the property. Or 3, the property at issue is non-residential. And then 4, if they do owe rent, the landlord must certify that the tenant's been served with the declaration form and that they did not receive a qualifying declaration back. So there's really 4 instances where evictions can be filed. Just briefly, I was part of the town hall meeting back March or April of 2020 when the moratorium first came out. It was on a Saturday, and I had fears that many crafty landlords, and I don't mean that derogatory, I was expecting many rent-based evictions to be cloaked in a safety health issue. And frankly, I haven't seen that. So hopefully with some of the questions, I can dispel what I'm actually seeing in court versus what people may be hearing. I can't attest to, eviction issues that are outside of the court process, but there's currently 4 instances where evictions can proceed.
Okay. And are we seeing many of these kinds of cases coming forward right now?
The health and, well, first off, anytime a case is filed, I not only am the chief judge, but it's actually my docket. So I'm not speaking on behalf of what some other judge does. So Adrian and I are both passionate about this. We're both part of a statewide task force that involves landlords, representatives, tenant representatives, rental assistants. There's two other judges that gives guidance to the Supreme Court on some of these issues. So as far as the health and I call them health and safety, they picked up maybe 8 months ago and they're hit or miss. I thought we were going to see a steady stream, extremely high, because typically based on the allegations, it's hard for the parties to reach an agreement. And I should say, just so everyone's clear, just because the landlord alleges that in a filing that I then have to review, the landlord still has to carry the burden on that at trial. So there is some protection if a landlord, for instance, is fabricating a health or safety issue. It's got a first pass muster to get a summons issued, but they also have to carry the burden when we get to trial. So it's kind of a preliminary showing is what I call it. So health and safety issues, they kind of come and go, but not to the level that I think we thought. Obviously non-residential, those are occurring, but we haven't seen a lot of those either, believe it or not. And then the last one, we have seen an uptick in the rent-based evictions where the landlord has served the qualifying declaration on the tenant, and then the tenant has not returned it or tendered it prior to filing. However, they can file it when they come to court, and they oftentimes do. So they can file that at any time. And anecdotally, it's turned out that those that come to court on the first appearance, we have Prairie State present, we have the town of Normal, the town of Bloomington, and other rental assistance agencies. And they typically then meet with Prairie State. They may tender a declaration, but all of them are meeting with rental assistance, and I have yet to have a case go to trial on rent-based issues only. So
Okay.
whether that's a representative sample of all landlords, I don't know. But from what I've seen, the majority, if not all of the landlords that I'm encountering in court are doing what they can to assist getting these folks rental assistance. So it's just a question of matching them up. And we've determined with Prairie State and others that this was the best bang for the buck scenario that we could come up with.
Okay. So, okay, if we believe that there are, this pending pent up evictions that have not been filed, obviously because of the moratorium, what can you say about the plan to address the evictions that will be filed once that moratorium ends? How is this going to be managed? This could be a tsunami. Let's
It
hope
could.
not.
I mean, out of the 5 counties, I know here we're just talking about McLean, the smaller the county, the less problems they're encountering. I think it's just in smaller communities, people know who their tenants are, and it's a much closer knit arena. Yeah, I mean, the biggest struggle we've had here court operation wise is every time the moratorium is extended, we get no advance notice. So we have to plan as if it's going to end the next time it's going to end. The next one ends in Illinois, May 29. So we have to gear up for all of that. And there's so many pieces to the puzzle because lawyers, it's so much uncertainty every time that not just that it gets extended, but it's typically now getting extended with a twist of some sort that we have to study, that the lawyers have to study, and Prairie State and everyone else to advise folks. So the plan right now is a couple. We have not extra judges, but judges have devoted that aren't hearing these cases regularly, but are trained in them. They're ready to go to hear trials. So we have that to deal with, but they keep pushing those dates out. There is talk statewide, whether or not the governor does this or not, but some sort of step down procedure to the moratorium. So it wouldn't go from 100 miles an hour to 0, that maybe there would be a step down procedure of 30 to 60 days where cases could be filed, but not go to trial and not have orders of evictions entered without an agreement. Because, I mean, there's no ifs, ands, or buts. There's going to be a backlog. We can only handle so many cases at a time. Prairie State only has so many attorneys. So we would like, I would just like to see, even though I don't want someone to get sued, we'd like to almost see filings be allowed, because we think that's the best chance for this subset of individuals that so far has not been receptive to their landlord reaching out to them. And I'm not saying there's not unscrupulous landlords that, are pulling fast ones here and there, but for the majority, I think they're inherently trying to get something accomplished with rental assistance. So the ones that have made it to court are typically folks that have just ignored the declaration and have not done anything. And hopefully this serves as motivation for both sides to get it worked out.
Okay. What can you say about the eviction diversion program? And is rental assistance a component of that?
Yeah, and I'm sure Adrian will pipe in at the end if I get it wrong, but we've spent hours and hours in discussions and meetings with Adrian, with Taylor and others, and also from the city of Bloomington and Mid-Central or Mid-Community. And whether I call it the word diversion gets, I think, used a lot. So it's really, and judges, I was talking yesterday during the pre-planning meeting, judges are kind of caught in a rock and a hard place here because we're called upon to be neutral. We're supposed to apply the law equally to both sides, and we hate to get caught in the middle of, rooting for landlord or rooting for tenant. That's just not what we do. So we are struggling, I guess, some judges with the magnitude of the pandemic, but once the moratorium ends, what authority we then have to just say, okay, we're going to stay these landlords off even further from what the moratorium provides. But the program we've set up, and Adrian and I had multiple discussions about whether we have some Saturday rental symposium at the Coliseum, and obviously we have COVID concerns with getting a large number of people together, whether we didn't know whether landlords would even want to show up, and we couldn't compel them to show up. So unfortunately or fortunately, we've determined the best bet is the program we have set up, which is on the first court date. Prairie State's there, rental assistance is there, landlord is either there in person or by their attorney. And so far, those folks then go out and I give them as much time as they need. And I would say 9 times out of 10, they're coming back in saying, Judge, we'd like to continue the case for 30 to 40 days to let the rental assistance situation play out. And most of them have come back with some sort of an agreement. It's not going to be every case, but that's basically the diversion program that we've got in place here. We couldn't find any other scenario that would get everyone in the same place. We have made arrangements, though, that those are in person rather than on Zoom, because we felt that the efficacy of the program would be lost on Zoom, because some of these tenants may be not sophisticated to know what to do next and who to call. And then they get tied up in phone calls and everything else. So they're meeting with folks in the actual courthouse, and we're able to socially distance. So we feel that's the best effort for the tenant and for the landlord.
Okay. And are you seeing some successes with this?
Yeah, Adrian can speak because he and his attorneys are in there. And I think I would just say out of every 10 cases, I mean, if not, other than the folks that got served with a summons that failed to show up, which I can't explain why they didn't show up. But as to the ones that are showing up, I mean, I would say 8 or 9 out of 10 of them, even the landlords they're jointly requesting a continuance to go ahead and explore the rental assistance program. I had one yesterday where the person chose not to go with Prairie State, did not pursue any rental assistance, and we're heading down the path towards a potential trial over rent. But that's only being set after we've given them whatever we can that's available.
Okay. Adrian, did you want to add something?
Yeah, just briefly, I think the program that we've set up is really helpful because it does make it very easy, and you're connecting these tenants with rental assistance right there at the courthouse, and that's a very effective way to do it. And there's been a few questions in the chat about what do you do about tenants who don't pursue rental assistance, and I think this answers that question in a good way.
Yeah.
And I guess I should follow up that. So I'll make it quick, if the complaint to evict is predicated on non-payment of rent and a declaration has not been tendered, fast forward to the court date, the tenant then walks in and presents a declaration. Up until April 6th, we had absolutely no guidance legally how we were to handle that. Who's the burden on? Can the landlord challenge that declaration? So for instance, if the landlord has information to believe the person's making in excess of $99,000 for a single person, $198,000 for a couple, should they be allowed to present evidence to challenge the veracity of that declaration? So April 6th, the Illinois Supreme Court did give us guidance. So now, for instance, declaration is tendered in court. I then turn to the landlord and ask them if they wish to challenge the declaration. If they do, they have to file something setting forth what their basis is as to why they believe that declaration should be thrown out. The risk the landlord runs, if they lose, the case is dismissed and sealed. So there's, it kind of keeps things in checks and balances. And I think, frankly, most of the arguments on those issues are going to be whether the person had the ability to make some partial payments but failed to do so.
Okay. All right. So it sounds like the last
But
stop.
that'll be fact dependent on every case. And so far, I've not seen. Oh, good.
Oh, I was just gonna say, it sounds like the
It is
last,
the last stop. I
Ah.
mean, yeah, it is the last stop. We obviously wish it is the last stop. We prefer these cases not be filed and they get worked out, but that's just not, I'm sure Mustaali can talk. It's just not realistic to expect that. It's a hope, but whether some people choose not to tender the declaration or to cooperate through whatever, they're not sophisticated or they're putting their head in the sand for, they have a lot of pressure on them. This is basically a backstop that we think protects both sides.
all right. Well, thank you very much, Judge Fellheimer. That was very insightful. I want to turn now to, now that we kind of have the sense of how things have been going and, you know, perspective from the courtroom as well, let's introduce or reintroduce Lauren Gibson again and allow her to introduce what maybe many of us have been here anxiously waiting to hear about, and that's this new program from IDA. So Lauren, go ahead and share your screen as you need to.
All right, let me get this shared here. All right, can everybody see that?
That looks good.
All right. So I'm just going to talk a little bit about how to apply for the 2021 Illinois Rental Payment Program that's run through the Illinois Housing Development Authority, or IDA, based on the information that they provided as of last week. So IDA is administering over $500 million to promote housing stability during the COVID-19 pandemic, and that is through that Federal Consolidated Appropriations Act that was passed in March of 2021. So the goal is really to prevent the eviction of tenants unable to pay rent due to the COVID-19 pandemic, as well as to prevent housing providers from going into foreclosure on rental properties. The program is scheduled to launch at 9 a.m. on May 17th, so that's next Monday at ilrpp.ida.org, and that's on your screen. And in the meantime, I suggest visiting ida.ida.org, and that's ihda.org for the latest updates. There'll be a pop-up once you get to the website that you can go directly to the page where they have the current information about the program. So a little bit about the program. It can cover up to 12 months of rental arrears, plus an additional 3 months of rent going forward. Those must be incurred between June of 2020 and August of 2021. There's a maximum grant amount of $25,000 per unit, and that is needs-based, unlike the IDA program that was in place in 2020 when it was a flat $5,000 per tenant or per unit. The assistance is paid directly to the housing providers or the landlords, not to tenants. It is a landlord-led application, so the first portion of the application, which I'll get to in a minute, is to be initiated by the tenant. So like I said, that'll open at 9 a.m. on May 17th, and it'll run through June 7th. So it's a pretty short timeline. So I would say if you plan on applying, whether you're a landlord, a property owner, or a tenant, make sure you have kind of all your documentation and stuff ready before the portal opens. IDA did say that payouts will begin 2 to 3 weeks after the portal closes. So we're really hopeful that the funds will get into the hands of our housing providers a lot quicker than happened in the last round. Just one note, if a landlord does not want to participate in the program, tenants may still be eligible to receive assistance during an upcoming tenant application period, which will run tentatively June 9th through June 28th. Details on that program aren't out yet, but we're hoping that the cooperation between the landlords and tenants in this first round will take care of a majority of the need. So like I said, up to $25,000 per tenant or rental household, and that's based on needs. So for an example, if a tenant was only behind 4 months, then this program would cover those 4 months plus an additional 3 months of future rent. So by accepting the money, the housing provider must waive all fees and penalties related to the household occupancy of the unit. They also may not initiate or engage in eviction proceedings due to any past due rent for the coverage period. So who's eligible? So very same eligibility criteria as the last round. The household must have experience of loss of income, incurred significant costs, or experience of financial hardship due to COVID-19. The household must be behind on rent for at least 1 month and at risk of experiencing homelessness or housing stability. A household's annual income in 2020 must be at or below 80% of the area median income adjusted for household size. So I did put that chart for McLean County down at the bottom of the slide. So for instance, for a family of 2 to be eligible, their income in 2020 must be less than $59,650. And this information is also on IDA's website. So the tenant must be currently living in the unit for which the assistance is provided, and it must be their primary residence, obviously located within the state of Illinois. One thing to note is that proof of citizenship is not required to apply for this program, and the Illinois rental payment program is not considered a public charge benefit. So a little bit about how the program works. So like I said, the housing provider or landlord will initiate the application, and both the tenant and housing provider will jointly apply. I also want to emphasize the importance of the tenant and housing provider both having a working email. The tenant will need to share their email with their housing provider in order for them to initiate the tenant portion of the application. Again, grant payments will be based on the tenant need as to how many months they're behind in rent. And IDA will be prioritizing applicants who are unemployed and at or below 50% of the area median income. Another thing that's different from the 2020 program is that both tenants and landlords or housing providers will be able to track the status of their applications at ilrpp.ida.org/status. A little bit more about how this process works in detail. So in section 1, the housing provider will initiate the application and provide basic information about the tenant, past due rent, as well as attest that they will adhere to the rules of the program. One thing to note is there must be a separate application for each tenant. So if you have, say, 40 tenants that are behind in rent, you have to do 40 separate applications. So the application will be available in English and Spanish as well. So once the housing provider completes section 1, they will receive an email from DocuSign within 24 hours with instructions telling them how to complete section 2. Just be sure to check your spam and junk folders for that email as well. So in section 2, the housing provider will provide the following information: the proof of property ownership, a property management agreement if there is one, social security number or individual tax identification number, employer identification number if applicable, a current signed lease if one is available, as well as the proof of past due rent. So once the housing provider completes that section, the tenant will then receive a DocuSign email within 24 hours to complete section 3. And again, I want to reiterate that the landlord or the housing provider applying must have that tenant email address. So there are different options of documentation that the housing provider can upload to verify this information. And also something new with this program that I don't believe they allowed in the last program is if you can't scan this information, you can provide photographic evidence of it as well. So for the evidence of property ownership, that could be an installment of your 2019 or 2020 property tax bill, a 2021 monthly mortgage statement, a deed, or a printout from the county website. If one is available, the current signed lease must be uploaded as well. And again, if it's applicable, fully executed and current property management agreement. A few different options for the written documentation of past due rent. Those include a notice of rent past due, an eviction notice, or other written evidence such as a rent roll that contains the amount of rent past due for the household, the unit address, as well as the tenant's name. So getting to section 3, that's where the tenant will fill out their portion of the application. They will complete and upload their following information and documentation, which includes a government issued photo ID, which doesn't necessarily have to be a driver's license, a utility bill or some proof of address dated within 90 days of application, evidence of 2020 income for each wage earner in the household, as well as proof of any public assistance received, such as SNAP, TANF, Medicaid, or Head Start, if that is applicable. So, and this is another thing that's new with the 2020 program. So IDA acknowledges that it may be difficult for some tenants to provide proof of income for 2020 in the form of W-2s or pay stubs, especially if those tenants were not or currently aren't employed. So in those cases where that documentation is not available, IDA has created an income attestation form where tenants can self-report and self-certify their income. Just an important note for tenants as well as housing providers applying to the program that submitting false information may violate federal and state laws. So for any applicant, whether that be a housing provider or a tenant that may need help applying, maybe if they don't have access to a computer or they have a language barrier, IDA has designated local organizations to provide assistance through their Housing Stability Services Program. And I just learned that in McLean County, that organization will be the Immigration Project. So just to kind of reiterate some key messaging that IDA has supplied, a submitted application is not necessarily a guarantee of assistance. And it will be critical to communicate with all potential applicants that not everyone who submits an application will be eligible for funding. And again, the portal is scheduled to be open only for 3 weeks until Monday, June 7th. So there's a sense of urgency with getting all your documentation together and getting ready to apply. And then again, once the application is submitted, both the tenants and the housing providers are able to track their application status via ilrbp.ida.org/status. There will also be a call center. This is a statewide call center run by IDA at 866-IL-HELP-1. So this is in addition to the local assistance provided at the Immigration Project. And so the hours for this will be from 8 a.m. to 7 p.m. Monday through Friday, starting on the day that the application opens on Monday, May 17th. And there will be language coverage in Spanish and Polish on this call center. Just a couple more pieces of information. The IDA's website has a lot more detailed FAQs than I went in today. So if you have more detailed questions, it's likely that those questions could be answered on that website. So I suggest that you check that out. There will also be a free webinar on Monday, May 17th. So that's the day the application opens, from 11 to 12:30 with IDA staff who will go through an application tutorial. And I think Kathleen is going to go put that link in the chat for you all. So really, that's all I have. I just want to emphasize the importance that, this is a $500 million cash inflow of housing assistance to the state of Illinois. This is probably one of the greatest in, volume housing assistance programs we've seen flow from the federal government ever. So I'm, really excited about this program and what it can hopefully do for residents as well as housing providers in McLean County. Go ahead and stop sharing. All right.
There we go. So I've put a couple of things in the chat box. Thank you very much, Lauren. Full of information there. I did put the IDA webinar link in the chat box. Please submit your questions to Adrian in the chat box as well. And somebody has inquired as to if this PowerPoint presentation will be available with a lot of the links and phone numbers. With Lauren's permission, I will put that on our United Way COVID resources page, and I'm going to put that in the chat box as well. So give me a day or two to get that up there, but it'll be in definitely up by let's see, today's Tuesday, so if not tomorrow, check definitely by Thursday. We'll get that up there for you. Adrian, do you have any questions you want to field now while we wait for others to come in?
Yeah, there's a few good questions. I'm sort of combining a couple questions here. There's been, I think, a little bit of frustration about tenants not applying for these rental assistance funds that are available through Town and Normal, Mid-Central Community Action, the local ones, not necessarily the IDA one that Lauren was just talking about. And I wanted to pose this to Mustaali. Do you have any successful strategies or tips to encourage tenants to seek these services out and apply for them?
Yeah, so I can just explain what we do in our office. So it's sometime last year in the fall, we hired a full-time collections person. That's what we call them. But their primary objective was to learn and understand all the resources available in the community and find ways to access those resources. And what we did was we went through all of our tenants that have experienced hardship and are behind, and we sent them lists of all the resources available. We made our staff available for them to come in. We even offered to fill out the tenant portion of the application for them. We have a portion of tenants that English isn't their first language, and some of this is really outside of what they've ever done before. So we made ourselves and our staff available to help in any way possible. We had good success on that. Now, I'll mention the first round of IDA funding that was available, we had 100 tenants apply. So we sent all of our tenants that were behind a link to it with directions and an explanation on how to fill out that form. We had 100 apply and 50 were approved. Okay, so there was an effort made, but not everybody got that funding. And so that's how we handled it in our office. We just kind of put the burden on us to educate ourselves so we can educate our tenants.
Thank you very much.
Adrian, if I could, Adrian, I could jump in here also. So I've had a number of the Town of Normal here. I'm sure the city of Bloomington's had the same thing happen. Landlords reaching out to us with this very question. And speak for the town, I got to think the same is true of Jennifer over at the city of Bloomington. I'm not above sending a letter to some address just saying, hey, I've been contacted by a landlord. There are resources available providing contact info for either our program or others. So I don't know. We're not above that either. Certainly, want to help. The municipalities have this money. They want to get it out, and we want to help tenants remain housed and help landlords pay their bills too. So that's another thing that's out there. So Town of Normal, get a hold of us. Happy to send such a letter to a tenant that's up to now not applied, and they may still not seek assistance, but it's one more thing you could try.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Taylor, and thanks, Mustaali. One person had a creative solution. I don't know if it's allowed. Maybe Taylor knows. let me phrase this correctly. I think I'm going to phrase it. Would it be appropriate for a landlord to pay a tenant to seek rental assistance if they thought that would incentivize them where they otherwise weren't seeking it?
Well, we do have attorneys and judges on here that can weigh into the legality of that. But I do know that there's at least one outfit here, property management company locally, that has, I think, provided a credit to tenants for applying. Now that maybe that just does away with a late fee or two that's out there. You know, it's not anything crazy, or, you know, it's certainly not near what a monthly rent amount is. So I do know that's out. That I guess this outfit was not worried about that. Again, I can't speak to the legality of that exactly, but there's other things too, like Mustaali said, just providing providing staff and time to help fill out an application, that helps too. I suppose pizza, that may help too. That seems to always do the trick. I don't know, but no, I don't think that's I don't think that's been an issue. At least I can tell you this, as far as the programs that town manages, the city of Bloomington, it's the same deal. That has not prevented us from helping folks, you know, them having received a little bit of an incentive or something like that, or relief from a landlord on maybe late fees.
Great, thank you. A couple more questions here. We saw the IDA income limits. Lauren had those up. I think it was 80% of AMI. Someone asked what the income limits were for the other program, and I think they meant the CDBG program. Is there a easy way to answer that question, Taylor?
Sure, it's the same. It is the exact same guidelines. It's nice the state made it that simple. So it's 80% of area median income, and for Bloomington normal, that's quite high. That's quite a high income cap. You can help most folks, and I can speak to CDBG funded programs. We can help people that were actually above that income amount you see there prior to the pandemic. We can help those folks out with up to a certain amount of money. But no, it's nice. The local programs operate under the same income restrictions.
Great, thank you. I think I have a couple questions for Lauren. I think you answered this one, Lauren, but I want to be sure. For the IDA phone line, that's only available in English and Polish, correct? Not in French?
Yeah, that's what they told us currently. I don't know if they have any plans to expand that or not.
Do you know, or do you know, Taylor, does Immigration Project, since they are helping IDA help applicants apply for this new program, can they support people who speak French in their application?
I do know that they do here currently. Yeah, Lauren, sounds like you know too. Yeah. I do know that's the case. They help out with translating our applications and helping those that speak, you know, Spanish, French, English. So I'd have to assume if they're an outfit helping with the state's program, that they do the same in this instance.
Excellent, thank you. I think I'm running out of questions here, but I'm gonna double check. Okay, someone asked if these resources are available to residents only in McLean County. And I'll ask Taylor to answer that question first.
So depending on which program you or your tenants are looking for help or information on. So for town assistance, you've got to be a town or normal resident. Same follows for City of Bloomington in normal township, City of Bloomington township. MCCA, when funds are available, same, I believe, for Immigration Project can help countywide. But no, what we're talking about here, at least these local programs that I'm here to speak to, they are tied either to a municipality specifically in McLean County or McLean County more generally. That's my understanding, my take.
No, thank you. I think each community has different options, and we're definitely speaking to what's available in McLean County. And Lauren, yours is a statewide program, correct?
Yeah, that's correct. Anyone in the state of Illinois that lives in the state can apply.
Okay, this is a great question. If the tenant's lease is up at the end of June, And I assume, I think, and if they move out, can I still apply for funding if they are gone?
I can jump in and speak to local program here. So it takes, Town of Normal, City of Bloomington, it takes us, we like to tell folks about a month from a time an application is put in to when a check is actually cut and sent out to either a landlord or a, utility provider. We try to make it quicker, but that's a good number. At the time that an application is submitted, that person needs to be living in that tenant that they're seeking help for paying the rent for. And then same goes for when that check is cut ultimately too. So if, that's an unfortunate situation or a restriction on these funds that as I believe it to be the case for Ida too, Lauren, that, you can only receive assistance for a place you are living, either at the time, both the time you apply and then also the time the assistance is provided.
Yes, that's correct for the IDA program as well.
So I think the key there is at the time of the application, the person must be living there. Okay. All right.
I guess, Adrian, real quick,
Yes.
I think just as a corollary to that, we have two odd situations, not to go too deep into this, but there's a slew of eviction orders that were entered pre-moratorium that ordered someone to be evicted, either at a trial or otherwise, that have not been able to be enforced by the sheriff. And that's a lot. So I guess when the moratorium lifts and you hear a word that people are being evicted, I suspect those are orders that were entered a long time ago, maybe even before the pandemic hit, that got tied up in the moratorium. I don't know if Taylor or Lauren knows, for folks that have already had an eviction order entered, can they still apply for assistance?
Here at the town, we did have one case where a person prior to the pandemic had, they'd fallen behind and an eviction notice was filed and given to this tenant. And then I think in the town reaching out, just saying, hey, this person has applied, to the landlord, reached out and said, hey, this person has applied for assistance. Here's what we can do. That landlord was nice enough to, walk away from that. So we can help out.
Okay.
Yeah, we can help out. Sorry that I've only had that happen once. So, and that one,
I suspect where the rubber meets the road is when the sheriff starts going out and enforcing those older orders that have been dormant for a year plus. That's an issue. Then the only other issue I'll throw into the mix here that really isn't rent-based, we have a whole bunch of evictions, I suspect, that are not health and safety issues and they're not rent-based. So I get files delivered to me where it's usually a pro se, meaning a self-represented landlord, is alleging some sort of lease violation, not rent-based, but it also doesn't rise to the level of a health and safety issue. And those are not provided for as an exception to the moratorium. We also have folks that hold over, so their lease expired. They're just living there. There is no lease, and the moratorium doesn't account for that either. So, and I'm sure Mustaali maybe he's got folks that are falling into that category too.
Yep, we definitely do. And we've not been successful in getting those folks evicted if they're behind on rent.
I do wonder if that question might be addressed in IDA's FAQ, the larger question just about residency when you apply and when you receive assistance. So maybe that's in there. I might look there.
Yeah, so it is, and it's basically just what I said, is that the tenant must currently be living in the property. And to kind of speak to that, if there was like a prior eviction filing that hasn't been able to go through IDA's program, that wouldn't really affect it, but they can only do rent going as far back as June 2020. So any rental arrears before that, they would not be able to help them.
All right, thank you. I think there's two other questions here. We're coming to the end of the time. Lauren, so Immigration Project is helping people who will be applying for the IDA program. Is that accurate? I think the question is, will the immigration project only be assisting folks born in other countries?
No. Yeah, you do. They will assist anyone in McLean County, landlord or tenant, regardless of their residency status.
Great. And then another question. This one is a real confusing question. Not confusing. It's going to be a hard question to answer. So I'm interested to hear what the answer is. What if the building is sold before the money is received? Can the previous owners still accept money for back rent?
I don't know about the state's program. Do you have an idea, Lauren?
You know, that specific item is not addressed in the FAQ that I'm aware of. I would say if you're in that situation, I would attend the IDA webinar or send them that question directly. And my advice, regardless of, you know, what you plan on doing, just apply. And, you know, the worst they can do is turn you down.
I think that one's coming to the courtroom, Judge.
That's probably bad lawyering on the buyers and sellers, attorneys' standpoint.
All right. Yeah, I think that is all the questions that we have. I think I've made it through them all.
Okay. Well, thank you for staying a little extra longer. We do try to keep these close to an hour, but as I put in the chat box, I thought it was worth our time to go another quarter hour. So let me just ask a couple of our panelists here to help us close up. Judge Fellheimer, maybe what closing thoughts do you have in terms of how do we proceed from here?
Well, I think we've learned, this is probably the most obvious statement I can make. We've learned since last March that we just have to be flexible and adapt. And, you know, we're trying to predict what's coming and put our resources in place and trying to be realistic with how many folks we can reach. And, you know, thank God we've got Adrian and his crew. We've got the rental assistance folks, and, you know, we just proceed along as best we can. I don't think we have a magic wand. And thank God we have these programs, and hopefully we reach all of them. And obviously, you know, there's landlords out there that I think are suffering too. So I don't want to get caught up in I'm not rooting for any sides, on both sides. This is a public health crisis. So I think there's two sides of the coin. And I guess the blessing here and the silver lining is, at least locally, from what I've seen, I think the landlords locally have really been patient. I'm sure they're frustrated. But I haven't seen the abuses, at least coming before me, to force tenants here. I think the landlords truly do appreciate the seriousness of the situation.
Thank
so
you.
That's all I have. Thanks for letting us, you know, provide an insight so that we can clear up maybe some misconceptions of what actually we're seeing versus what you may hear through the grapevine.
Very good. Thank you. And Mustaali, our landlord on the panel, I'm going to give you a final word before I close up.
Okay, yeah, I want to piggyback on what Judge just said. You know, all the landlords that I know are part of this community. The tenants are part of this community. So these programs that are coming out, it's a win-win-win. It's a win for the landlords, it's a win for the tenants, and it's a win for the community. And I think oftentimes we get stuck in, well, this is the tenant's responsibility or this is the landlord's responsibility. I think at least the stance that we've taken in our office is this is our responsibility as a whole. And we're all part of this community, and this community is small. And so having these resources available is a huge win. I encourage all tenants and landlords to work together and try to get these resources. Otherwise, they're going to end up north in Chicago, and we're not going to get anything. So let's take what we can get downstate and make this community better as a whole. So, you know, as a landlord and a member of this community, this is all really good information.
Great appeal for call to action. So thank you for that. With that, I will just once again reiterate a gratitude for everybody on the panel who shared their expertise, and for all of you participants who came tonight. I will put the information from the slide deck out on our www.uwmclean.org/resources. That was in the chat box. Also, we will be launching here in the next 48 hours or so and over the next few weeks, a pretty massive marketing promotional campaign with all of this information, IDA, the websites. So be looking at billboards and ads on the buses and flyers throughout the community. So we are going to do what we can from United Way's perspective to, not just stop the conversation and the information flowing from tonight's town hall, but to get it out and paper this community with billboards and flyers and ads and you name it. So be on the lookout for that. And like Mustaali said, let's take advantage of this benefit that's coming our way. So thank you very much. And everyone have a great evening.
Thank you.